some of the problem here is the default mode network. And the way I understand it, the default mode network is two small portions of your brain, one in the front, one in the back, and it is basically a highway of neurons which is passing information back and forth to those two specific locations in the brain. The rest of the brain is actually pretty dormant, from what I understand. We don't. I can't remember the percentage, but I think we only use
maybe 10% of your brain.
Yeah, it's a very small percentage of our brain, which is the default mode network. Now, the default mode network is internal thinking. It's your ego. It's self-critical. It
protects you.
Judging others. It's basically if you're thinking about the past, if you're thinking about the future, if you're judging somebody, if you're self-critical, all that's ego. That is the default mode network.
It's what we've been taught to do.
And
when you're growing up and you go to do something, your parents say, don't touch that.
Yeah. So apparently when you're born, you use a lot more of your brain than we do, when we're our age.
It's because we're free. We haven't been institutionalized yet.
Yeah.
We haven't been told no.
It's amazing. Like reading this stuff is just fascinating to me.
And that's why as you get older, Ryan, it's just, you get more and more institutionalized because you're not resetting that.
Yeah.
You're just, that default mode is just going, it's on autopilot, it's on repeat.
Yeah.
It just keeps repeating. And so you have to figure out a way to disrupt that.
So apparently what happens from the sources I researched from is basically when you take one of these psychedelics, it disrupts that neuron highway on the default mode network. And so there is no more information being passed in between. And if you take antidepressants, benzos, those kind of Valiums, Xanax, whatever it is, it's basically slowing the neurons going back and forth in the default mode network. Now, when you take the psychedelic, it disrupts the default mode network, or maybe even shuts it down, which forces your brain and the neurons in your brain to communicate with other sections of your brain, making the neurons more efficient. So
allows you to wake up.
Sorry?
Allows you to wake up.
Yeah. So it literally, I was very skeptical of this stuff too, and until I started hearing more and more guys talk about it. Now you've 100% sold me, but I used to think, oh, this shit is for hippies. I don't do that. And now I'm like, shit, maybe these hippies maybe they were onto something.
Yeah.
And when they say it unlocks your brain, they actually mean exactly what they're saying. It unlocks the other 90% of your brain and makes it more efficient.
Makes you more creative. Makes you smarter, right? Like if you're using 10% of your brain and now I'm going to make up a number, even 11%, 12%.
Yeah.
Like you just, right now using more of your brain power. What a doctor explained to me is what you're talking about. The brain's really good at talking like linear. Psychedelics, it like opens up the highway, right? So if you have like a 2-lane highway, it just turned it into like a 12-lane highway.
Yeah.
And it allows different parts of your brain to interact with each other that were not talking to each other before. And it's like a baby, right? Like babies, or kids have such incredible creative minds, right? They're like, hey, what if, what if I, took this and, right? Kids are like coming up with all these great stories and ideas, and you're like, that's nuts. And that's because they're not brainwashed. They're not institutionalized to think of this way that doesn't work. They're just thinking, right? Like, and of course, a lot of it is, is babble, but they're able to creatively think outside the box. We've been put inside the box by constantly being told, no, don't touch that. Take your shoes off when you go to the house. Make sure to eat all your vegetables. Some of that stuff is good, but you're seeing where I'm going, where a lot of that stuff is not good.
Yeah.
We can get into all types of things that have institutionalized us to think a certain way. All this is doing is, it's the matrix for your mind. Like, think outside the box, right? Unconventional thinking is what we try to do in the teams. Think outside of this institution of the military that, keeps thousands and thousands of soldiers doing things a certain way. But we need to think a little bit outside of that box. Otherwise, we're just like everybody else. So just think of you being able to be more creative, more ways that you could potentially pursue something better and more efficiently than what you were maybe told from somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I did a good job of trying to explain that, but that's what you're talking about with the default mode network. Gets disrupted, and it just allows your brain to interact in different ways that it hasn't, or that it hadn't since it was a child.
Yeah.
Who has such an imaginative mind, right? Like, if we could all think like children in terms of creativity and imagination, not in terms of like, lifetime of lessons and that type of education.
Thinking about the science behind this and what it does, it makes a hell of a lot of sense, because the default mode network is past, its future, its ego, it's all the trauma that you've experienced. It's all forming who you are as a person.
Right.
And if you only have that one highway, when you take that hallucinogenic or psychedelic, it's like somebody just flipped the power grid on in your head, and it's amazing. So
that's why people call it, a lot of people experience what they call an ego death.
Yeah.
Depending on each person's different, but high dose, a lot of people see themselves just like, they call, is this what death is? Like, it just died. Their ego just died. That whole self, that protecting mechanism just went away, and they're able to look at life now as like, holy shit, I never even looked at this stuff before. I was so drilled into what I only learned over and over again. Now I'd actually see a tree.
Yeah.
It's green. We get some individuals will come out and say, I've been eating, I forgot what it was. It was like apples or something for like my whole life. And I looked at it and didn't even realize like the damn color of it until I took a psychedelic, because it rewired my way of thinking, like made me like think a little bit, be more aware of actually what's going on. That's why people say a lot of times, like, now I can see stuff, as it's happening or before it's happening, or when two people are acting a certain way, like when two spouses interact. It's so obvious now. I could tell that's a good relationship, that's a bad relationship, off of what I personally got off of the medicine.